next speaker and the last speaker for today, Bernard Key. And Bernard manages the STR Southeast Asia region, and he's primarily focused on hospitality-related development. From STR, he has wealth of experience in providing partners with a regional perspective to make informed planning decisions. He's an inspirational STR speaker at travel conferences, and he's been in airlines, hotels, online travel business, and hospitality for over 16 years. Bernard is going to shed some light on whether the rest of APAC can also follow in China's recovery strategies. Bernard, over to you.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to every one of you. Right, so thank you for the first three speakers who have gone through almost the entire world. So I'm going to cover a little bit more about Asia Pacific. And in where I'm going to share will be recovery, but in a different form of information that's coming to you. So let's take a look at this. But before I get into it, I would like to say a big thank you to all STR data participants. Some of you are here, I know. This year has been ridiculously tough. You've gone through temporary closures, you had staff changes, you're operating with different adjusted kind of inventory. But you have also supported us as data providers. And so without your support, we simply would not have been have the ability to provide these insights to you today. So a big thank you. And of course, before I get into it, I also have to say this, that we never give guidance on price. We will only comment on the facts. And so, with that said, let's look top down from global. Now, occupancy have improved through summer as leisure travel dominated. And now that the weather has cooled, kids, children, they are back at school, corporate travel hasn't been replaced. And Europe, as what Andrew has mentioned, is on new lockdowns and will further put that pain into the region. And within Asia Pacific, China and Australia are leading the way. You see the two lines there. China has resumed normal cyclical patterns, as you would expect to see. Japan, during the Silver Week holidays, had a boost and is supported by the government travel campaign. And also similarly to Australia, they are seeing regional demand, but more limited within the cities. Corporate demand hasn't really returned in great volumes yet. And then, of course, from the bottom, Thailand, India, for two different reasons, remain at low occupancy levels. Let's move on to Australia. It's a big country. We see that in Australia, we see two different paces of recovery. The regional at 74%, and the capital is at 43%. When we compare the states or the territories, regional markets are leading recovery over capitals. And also hooray for Victoria, who have come out of the woods. My son, who is there for studies, can return for Chinese New Year. So I am very grateful that it has gone to that stage. Japan. In Japan, there's gradual confidence of a comeback, although slower. Mega cities like Tokyo, Osaka mirrors the national occupancy data, but still dependent on domestic demand. Japan is reportedly working on reopening its borders to international travelers in April 2021, so next year. Of course, screening and testing for COVID-19 upon arrival. But the main idea for Japan is, of course, to prepare for the Tokyo Olympic Games next summer. With only 110,000 cases, about 1,800 deaths, it seems that Japan is trying its level best to keep it in control. Now, you notice I said only because they have just added 1,000 cases yesterday, but the total cases per million population is 872. So it's still relatively small compared to many, many other countries. Japan has declared the national state of emergency in early April with an effort to curb the transmission, but then it stopped short of instituting a full lockdown. And then elsewhere, high occupancy for regional markets, which is generally favored by domestic segment. So we see Kyoto, Nagoya, particularly moving. Of course, Hokkaido is already there. So closer to home, my home, over to Southeast Asia. We see Malaysia is still under a government lockdown, kind of movement control. They call it MCO, Movement Control Order, since March. General tourism is not possible. Border closures have recently been extended now to year end. Yes, there are medical tourism, but it's not going to move the needle. Even then, the country has only allowed 6 green lane to 6 countries. Indonesia is considering to reopen its international borders to regular travelers, even though it struggles with the region's biggest virus outbreak. Originally, the governor of Bali announced that the island will be reopened for its border to international arrivals. That was September 11, and that has passed. The new date is going to be end of this year. Fortunately for Indonesians, that domestic business is still big, so the domestic business demand is recovering a lot faster. And then moving to Philippines, is beginning to see some easing of restriction on selected group. I think it needs to do a lot more if it wants to revive the economy. And to succeed, it needs to ramp up its testing capacity to process the additional arrivals. Because with more than 400,000 reported infections as early as November, there are only 5 countries in Asia that have a higher number of infections than the Philippines. Well, the Philippines government has been encouraging domestic tourism, which does not require testing or any form of quarantine to offset the shortfall of international arrivals. But then economic recovery analysis in place, by allowing a limited amount of international tourism from countries where community transmission is under control, and with the same kind of testing and quarantine requirement of proposed green lane, the health risk could be lower than domestic. And that could actually achieve the same economic impact if they do allow foreign travelers to come in. For Thailand and Vietnam, they are experiencing weekend swings, as you can see. Thailand is considering a waiver of shortening the quarantine requirement to encourage tourism, from countries where transmission is under control. Health risks will still be lower than, the foreign health risks will still be lower than the domestic tourism, because the latter is neither tested or quarantined and is drawing from a bigger risk population. But then Thailand is complicated by some of these factors that we know, the recent political instabilities, muddled with irregular royal travel, aborted special tourism visas, the program that was meant for Phuket, it has just been aborted. So Thailand is likely to go through a more turbulent ride for a longer while. And then Vietnam, one of the lowest number of cases in Asia, slightly over 1,002. Non-essential travel is allowed at the moment internally. Sorry, no non-essential travel is allowed into the country. Domestic travel is cautious for 2 main reasons. Number one, what lessons they have learned from the Nang case. And number 2, conservation of their personal reserves. While local business are back, and the nation is still very careful to go full on, recovery is in sight for this mask-donning motorcycle nation. They are always been wearing masks, so they recover a lot faster. So I can't not mention this, because if we talk about recovery, we cannot ignore the future, what the future is going to look like. So STI has just launched this Forward Star. It's a forward-looking benchmarking report, and I'm going to show you what we have done for Pacific and now Singapore. More Asian markets will be added into the launch. And of course, to help you guys out there, if you're a GM, if you're an owner, you want to find out more, and if our team come to you knocking on your doors for recruitment, do entertain them. This is what you're going to see. So comparing three markets, Singapore, Sydney, and Melbourne. Sydney is more normalized. Singapore, with the assistance of government quarantine contracts for Singapore, hotel is now going away. The contract is now going away towards the end of this month. So, but then again, things can change very quickly because business coming into the hotel today for those non-government quarantine facilities, or we call it GQF, are mainly in two categories. One, the local demand, like your staycation, or some people have to get out of their house because they need to do renovation. So that's the local demand. Second, the return of workers or locals, but these are really far and few between. There is a third category that still exists, although smaller. These are company contracts to house stranded Malaysian workers, but many of them have already found alternative accommodation. So the question is, does the local staycation started in July is going to help? Well, Saturdays have seen slight spike of 5 percentage points over weekdays. This, I don't think, is going to be sustainable for a country that has less than 1 hour of commute end to end. And so there are green lanes being established for essential business travelers. All travelers entering Singapore must, of course, comply with the air travel pass, the test, and have an app, as what the earlier speaker mentioned. And so, but going forward, the forward data shows that a drop in occupancy from the 70s to the 20s region after November is signaling that this quarantine contract that the government is issuing to the hotels are likely not going to be renewed. And so the hotels will have to be fending for themselves. But of course, again, it can go back very quickly once they are re-signed. Now, still, you'll see more consistent pickup for Singapore into next year, and that's forward stars, what you saw earlier and what you are seeing now. Hong Kong-Singapore bubble that will start in November 22nd with 1 flight each day, maximum 200 passengers per flight. I think that limited number is insufficient to fill up the properties in Singapore. So it will substantially be increased, of course, if things gets better. But then, as what the earlier speakers mentioned, that international travel, is in Asia Pacific is really practically non-existent. The Hong Kong-Singapore air travel bubble is a small step, but it's also in the right step, in the right direction to reboot the entire international travel. And so with all this that's being said, what is really recovery going to look like? And so I said earlier, I'm going to show you something that is different from the earlier speakers, because this is where the recovery is going to look like for a lot of countries and cities and markets in the future. For China, holiday numbers were very impressive, looking at the 3/4 of 2019 levels, there was this combined holiday of National Day and Mid-Autumn Festival. Over the 8 days, significant actual travel in most locations, with the 3rd October peaking at 83%, as you can see on the slide. And then at national level, and with high ADR, as everybody went on holiday at that time. ADR refers to the average daily rate. You can see how close this year's performance to 2019 is in the green bars below. In addition, it was the last holiday for 2020 for the Chinese, so further pushing the demand. So what does a forecast look like for China? It is now very close and sometimes even above year-on-year. And that's likely to continue. There are uncertainty that could, fears of second wave, but that has been dealt with very rapidly. Maybe uncertainty in travel, confidence across business travel, but clearly the numbers are strong. There is a pent-up demand, especially when huge domestic market such as China, carries so much. So the week after holidays performed very well, still, at 70% with business traveling going on. Into the market itself for China, you see compared to last year, South and Southwestern China are leading the performance with all the red number, plus numbers down there that you see. And of course, then the price goes to the top tiers hotel, the luxury category, and of course, the upper upscale properties. Well, we can also expect Macau to come back once permit from Guangdong and all China opens. Taiwan is now starting to capitalize on the internal market. So in summary, we believe that travel is going to be in the horizon. Travel is not going to die. And things can happen quite quickly with fast testing or commercially available vaccine. The new norm is going to be the norm today. Therefore, operators have to think and act very differently from what you are used to and what you are taught. Traditional playbooks are going to go out. China is the best model to view recovery for now. And of course, recovery in most markets is likely to be in the 2024 at the earliest, which was also echoed by Andrew earlier. And with that, I thank you so much. Thank you for